the familiarity of all of these players. Now, when you play with Phil, do you play him a little bit of insight, maybe trying to get you to diverge a few secrets here? But how do you play Phil Ivey?
He's Phil Ivey, right? No, kind of like, I do remember the first time that I met Phil and I played against him was at the World Series in '05 when I actually won. And I will be perfectly honest, that was very daunting. He had a huge chip stack and he had this presence about him. But, 10 years on and playing with him several times, it's just another opponent, really, at the end of the day. You know what he's capable of. You know he's a high-level thinking player, so you just play accordingly.
Yeah, the best way is to treat him like he's just anyone else, right? Well, hard to do.
That's the beautiful thing about poker, though. When you sit at the poker table, it levels everybody out. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you've won, whether you haven't won, everyone's the same because the chips actually do the talking.
Phil Ivey has pocket kings here, and he's raised it up to 45,000. That's the problem with guys like Phil Ivey is they get good hands too, right?
They're allowed to.
Folds around to Dan Smith. And he announces all in, so I can't imagine Phil Ivey's going to fold. A quick call. Dan Smith, our short stack. He's got pocket fours, so, well, he's walked into a bit of a situation here, and he's on the verge of elimination.
This young man, Dan Smith, just recently won the Global Poker Index Poker Player of the Year for 2014.
Well, he's going to need a lot of help. He wants to see a 4 on this flop. Can he take chips off Phil Ivey? The flop, a 9-7-7 flop. Great flop for Phil.
Kings of Phil Ivey in front.
The table's gone very quiet now. The pot just a little under 600,000. The turn, a Queen of Hearts. So now only 2 cards in the deck can save Dan Smith.
These two aren't the most animated of characters.
But you just know that their minds are going at a million miles an hour, don't you? The river, an 8 of clubs. So we will lose Dan Smith. And Phil Ivey will take his chips and put them in his stack. And these guys are smiling and cracking jokes. I must say, it doesn't look like a table where the first prize is going to be 2.2 million, but I've got to hand it to them. They know how to play the nosebleeds, like you say. Folds around to Doug Polk, our chip leader. He lets it go. Round to Eric Seidel. We've spoken time and time again about how this man continues to play at such a high level. Richard Yong, one of the biggest characters we've seen in a long time. Still want to get a home game at his place, but I don't want to pony up the money to buy in. And there is Phil Ivey in the small blind. Eliminated Dan Smith a little earlier. Makes the call with ace-5 of clubs and Scott Seaver in the big blind. We'll check.
This calling out of the small blind with an ace has become more and more common these days. And it's partly pot control, partly trapping and, being elusive with the strength of your hand.
Scott Seaver with an inside straight draw. Ivey checks, as does Scott. The turn, a 7 of clubs now, so Seaver pairs his 7. Ivey checks again. This time Scott Seaver's going to fire.
Bidding 33.
Well, Seaver's got middle pair here. He feels confident. Ivey's checked twice. Show no strength at all at the moment.
Look at this. Phil Ivey's going to look him up.
Well, Ivey has an 8 or a 4 to make a straight. Unfortunately, the 8 won't do him any good.
Well, the river's a 5 of spades, so Ivey pairs his 5.
Kids to feed.
Scott Seaver, though, in control with a pair of 7s.
I think Seaver's thinking now, if Ivey has an 8 to make the straight or a 4, he'll bet into me. If he checks, I'm going to bet. If he bets, I'm going to call. And I think Scott will call here.
Well, Phil Ivey bets 80,000 into Scott Seaver. This is Phil Ivey at his best, figuring out what his opponent has and betting into him. Scott Seaver, though, he's no spring chicken. He knows exactly what's going on.
It certainly looks like Ivey, the way Ivey called the flop, certainly looks like he may have been on a draw to a straight. He may get Scott to fold here.
And he did, so there you go. We talk time and time again about how he plays at this high level, but he's made his opponent for his hand and he's taken advantage of it. Great play to him. It's just no coincidence that when Phil Ivey gets chips, the table goes a bit quiet.
These guys are playing at the highest level, understand that inherently. So Doug doesn't want to bloat the pot unnecessarily.
Scott Seaver folds round to the button once again. Doug Polk has been rather active lately. 4 players remain. One of them's going to take 2.2 million, but only one of them has won this title twice already, including last year, and that is Phil Ivey. Polk raises it up with ace-4 offsuit. There he is in shot.
Call.
And he makes the call, so they'll go at it again. This time Ivey with a 10 and a 9 offsuit. Here comes the flop. There is a 10 there. Well, an interesting flop too. A 10-3 deuce. So Polk with a straight draw and Ivey with top pair. Ivey checks quickly.
Now, Doug can bet here, or he can elect to take a free card for his gut shot straight.
Checks behind Ivey. The turn, a 2 of hearts. Action on Phil.
Betting 75.
75,000, just a little over half of the pot.
Doug can quite comfortably call here with his ace high. He's going to be ahead not most of the time, but a lot of the time he's going to be ahead. And he's also drawing to an ace or a 5.
Call.
Makes the call in position. The river is a 6 of clubs, so Ivey's pair of 10s are best. Action is on Phil. Can he get Doug Polk to call here with ace high, depending on the amount?
He could. Yeah, it depends what, how weak Doug sees Ivey as being and what the size of this bet is. Can't really bet too much. And he's bet the pot.
Betting 200.
That's almost the pot. So Ivey's taken the line that I want to represent a bluff, basically, to get called by ace high. This is the sort of thinking that these guys are doing. Like, he's put Doug Polk on ace high. Ivey said, I've got top pair, I want to get a call. I'm going to bet the maximum to make it look like I'm actually trying to steal the pot.
And Doug Polk hasn't moved, so Phil Ivey's instincts once again, no surprise. Clearly making Doug Polk think about a call. You can almost hear a pin drop in the room. Doug Polk really considering this call. You're right, Joe.
580,000.
Raised to 580.
Wow, this is a surprise. He's made a raise here.
So he's turned his hand into a bluff, basically.
And Phil Ivey hasn't moved, but look at those eyes.
Now, it's actually very simple for Ivey. There's no use raising. He's only going to get called by a better hand. Okay? He believes he's in front. If he does believe he's in front, he can just call and see what happens, right? If he believes he's behind, he can raise now to try and get his opponent to fold. But I think Ivey will just call.
Well, Ivey was caught by surprise there.
I didn't mean to bet 200, I meant to bet 175.
Ivey speaking out loud a little bit. You don't get that very often from Phil.
He just gave up a lot of information there. But I wonder whether that was deliberate to try and get a reaction from Polk.
You can never tell, right? He said, just to be clear, that he said that I meant to bet 175,000. Trying to elicit a reaction from Doug Polk, perhaps, a tell of some kind.
I think it was a pretty futile attempt, but maybe he's just being honest.
Does he got to put the chips in the pot or no when you raise? What's the rule?
Bets at 580.
You could just say it.
Bet's fine.
You could just say it without putting the chips in.
Phil Ivey's just asking and clarifying a few tournament rules. As we mentioned earlier, Joe, when they travel, those rules change, so you've got to clarify occasionally.
Yeah, but now that was definitely his searching for information there.
Okay.
He knows that this is now playing poker, right? This is playing with people's minds right
So
now.
you were right the first time. Don't trust them.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't trust poker
Yeah,
players.
yeah, he knows.
Not at the table anyway. Confused, frustrated. The tug of war is back, and even Phil Ivey gets it. It's great. Can he do it? Can he convince himself to call? He wants to, he doesn't want to. Do I, don't I? Every poker player in the world faces this, even Phil Ivey. There it is. He makes the call, so he will win a big pot. He almost looked a bit surprised there.
He was resigned to the fact that he's actually lost the hand, to be honest. So he was surprised that he won.
And was it because he couldn't figure out what Doug Polk was
Exactly.
doing?
He thought Doug had just trapped him or caught us.
Three-handed, a big hand with pocket kings. And the action will be on Doug Polk. He has the button. He began our feature table and our final table as the chip leader. He's done very well to come this far. Featured last year in the Aussie Millions also. Raises it up with 8-9 offsuit, facing a very scary Phil Ivey in the big blind. That is some big blind to go after. Phil will defend again.
Especially when he has that chip stack sitting in front of him as well.
Well, Ivey has 6-4 offsuit. The flop. A queen 5-3 flop with 2 hearts. So Ivey with an up and down straight draw. Polk. Well, Polk's got 9 high, but he's still ahead.
I would have liked to see Ivey bet into this flop, to be honest. It's so deceptive betting into this flop, then hitting the turn. Your opponent's never going to put you on it.
Ivey checks. Polk bets. 110,000.
Ivey's never folding here with an open-ended straight draw.
Now, is it just a call or is it a raise, or, you know, what are the options here?
Either option is valid, depending on what you put your opponent on. You know, he's out of position, doesn't want to bloat the pot just yet.
Makes the call, the turn, a 7 of clubs. So Ivey turns a straight. The action is on Phil now. Now, the interesting thing about that card is it still gives Polk a straight draw.
A 6 will give him the nut straight on the river. I like to see Phil check here. I think he has checked. Yep. Good check there.
Now, Polk fired at the flop. He backs down and checks. Now the river. It is a 9 of hearts. So, well, Doug Polk pairs his 9, but Ivey's got a straight. So it also completes the flush draw. Take us through from here, Joe.
The 9 is not a good card for Polk. Ivey should bet here, and Polk will probably call. Now that he's got middle pair, he feels obliged to call. But, you know, he could be strong enough to fold.
How much is it?
Well, he asks the question, so you're right, Joe. The bet has made Doug Polk curious, and it looks like the bet is around 300,000, and he's counting it out almost as though he's resigned to call. He has. He's calling immediately with his pair of 9s, and Phil Ivey takes a very, very nice pot off Doug Polk, turning the straight.
Life would have been much easier for Polk had the river bricked, but had it come nothing. He could have just easily folded his hand.
Well, Phil Ivey takes a very nice pot off Doug Polk. That would be. But in front of him is Mike McDonald. No stranger to, like Joe says, the nosebleed section. I sit next to the world champion from 2005 in his hometown, Joe Hasham. Well, you grew up in the Crown Poker Room. Did you ever think there was going to be a $250,000 buy-in that's a regular event on the calendar?
My God, Paul, I remember 15 years ago, you know, sitting around thinking, why aren't more people playing this game? And now you just look at the sea of people that are playing. It's really good. It's really nice to be part of this.
Oh, we've come a long way. A pot brewing here between Mike McDonald, who raises it up with King 4, and there is a king in the door, and Phil Ivey called with King 10. Flops 2 pair. Mike's got a big piece of this too.
This is not a good flop for Mike. Like, you know, us knowing the cards, he's basically drawing dead here. It's very hard for him to win this pot, but he doesn't know that.
Well, He checks, perhaps for pot control. The turn is a 3 of diamonds. I'd imagine there's some betting going. Look at this. Phil checks again, hoping Mike takes a stab. Well, Mike's got something. Surely he's going to bet now.
He should be betting now. I really like his check on the flop. Like, that must be just pure instinct to check that flop. Or he was maybe trapping Phil. You know, like thinking, well, I'm going to check back my top pair. Phil will take a stab on the turn. Doesn't know that Phil's flopped the nuts basically with King 10.
Mike's going to bet now.
The dynamics of this is incredibly interesting, Paul, because now Mike bets, hoping to induce Phil to raise him on a bluff, but Phil doesn't have a bluff. He actually has it.
He's got 2 pair.
So we could see a lot more chips go in the middle here.
125,000 is the bet. Action on Ivey, who makes a much bigger raise.
350,000.
350,000 now. Back on Mike McDonald with that glare.
Mike is in a world of pain right now, okay? He has top pair, no kicker. Like, if I'm in his spot, I'm going, how can I fold top pair in this spot? He must be making a move on me, you know? I have to at least call.
McDonald calls, so we will see a river and Phil Ivey in very good shape. This pot brewing to almost $1 million now. Phil Ivey has him against the ropes. The river is a queen of diamonds. Now, in the context of the hand, does that change anything, that river card?
It does, because King Queen is one of the hands that Phil can put Mike on. So it may change the dynamics. But he still has kings and tens. I mean, he's not going anywhere. He would be saying to himself, geez, I'm really unlucky here if he actually does have king queen, because I've gone from winning the pot to losing the pot.
Action's on Ivey now.
Seat 7 bets.
He pulls out a pile of chips. The dealer's going to count them out. 600,000. Can Mike fold here? It's a tough fold.
He can fold, but Ivey's bet the perfect amount to get him to call. So hard to fold with top pair.
And he does call, so wow. Phil Ivey with a super flop. Look, he was ahead before the flop. He outflopped Mike McD, and unfortunately for Mike McDonald, he flopped top pair. Played it very creatively in the end, you're right. A super bet on the river. And that really does make it hard for Mike McDonald now. I mean, how do you stop this man in this situation?
This is... now he's got a commanding chip lead. There are two things that need to happen for you to win a big pot, Paul. You to have the best hand, your opponent to have the second best hand.
Well, we have seen Mike McDonald claw back from almost 9 big blinds to a situation where he was challenging for this, and now he's going to need to do it again against Phil Ivey. We believe he can, but what an opponent he has. Mike McDonald raises the button with ace-queen offsuit. Action on Phil now.
All in.
And he announces all in. Surely it's a call. Yes, it is, very quickly. So waiting for Ivey's hand. He's got king, queen of clubs. Mike McDonald's got him dominated and is in very good shape to double up.
Yeah, those two hands play each other. Heads up, king, queen, ace, queen. There's no way the chips aren't going in the middle.
Ace, queen, are all in play.
Well, Phil Ivey's going to need to get lucky to knock him out. But if he does, it'll be 3 titles at the Aussie Millions at the $250,000 tournament. That would be astonishing. I mean, he's 2 is astonishing, but 3 is almost ridiculous.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. It's definitely unprecedented for sure.
Well, there's still a lot in between them on. Wow, what a flop. Look at this. King 10-10 flop. Phil Ivey has outflopped Mike McDonald, but Mike McDonald still has outs.
Well, now he's picked up the jacks as outs as well, so he's got 7 outs total.
He grabs the lead and 2 cards away. Mike McDonald can barely believe that Ivey caught the lead there. Will the turn be of any help? an ace or a jack is what we're looking for Mike McDonald to survive.
Needs a jack.
The turn is an 8 of hearts. If this river is not an ace or a jack, Phil Ivey will be a 3-time champion of the LK Boutique $250,000 challenge. Look for an ace or a jack, or Phil will be the champion again.
We head for the river. Mike needs
Can
an
Mike
ace or a
peel the
jack
river?
to remain in this tournament.
The river is a 9 of hearts, and that will do it. Phil Ivey, amazing. 3-time champion of the LK Boutique $250,000 buy-in event at the Aussie Millions. Joe, it's just, I'm almost speechless.
Incredible. Even Phil's a bit impressed with himself.
Well, Mike McDonald from Canada, he takes home just under $1.6 million for his trouble.